Knock was too soft to be a man's, too steady to be the wind. The rancher heard it just past dusk. 3 gentle raps on the heavy wooden door, no more, no less. Not a soul had come by in days, not with the roads swallowed in summer dust and the river low enough to whisper secrets instead of scream them. He rose slow from his chair, boots echoing across floorboards that hadn't known visitors in weeks. When he opened the door, the wind didn't blow in. Just 2 children, a boy maybe 10 standing rigid, holding the hand of a girl so small she barely came up to his waist. Her eyes were red, her hair was wet, and there was a cut above her brow that had long since stopped bleeding, but hadn't stopped hurting. The boy spoke first, voice flat, hollow, too calm for someone his age. "Papa killed Mama this morning." He didn't blink when he said it, didn't tremble. He only looked up and added, "Said it was 'cause she gave birth to a girl." Then he turned his face slightly toward the girl beside him and squeezed her hand. "This one." The rancher didn't move, didn't breathe, not until the boy took a breath that shook like leaves trying not to fall. "Please, sir," he whispered, eyes wide. "He said he's coming back for us." We ran. "We don't got nowhere else to go." The girl still hadn't spoken. She just looked up, silent and still, like a bird too tired to fly, waiting for something to land on. The rancher stepped aside without a word, held the door open wide, and watched as the boy led his sister inside, careful, like he didn't trust the ground to hold. When the door closed behind them, the wind outside stilled. But the storm had already come in. The wind howled through the chimney that night, low and long, like it had something to mourn. The girl sat curled on the rug, knees hugged tight to her chest, eyes fixed on the fire like it might open a door back to something she remembered before the world turned sharp. The boy, who said his name was Eli, stood behind her, stiff as a post, arms crossed in that quiet way children take on when they've had to become men too young. The rancher brought a quilt from the cedar trunk, the one that still smelled of pine and smoke, and laid it over the girl's shoulders. She didn't flinch, didn't thank him either, but she pulled it tighter, like maybe kindness was something she didn't quite know how to touch yet. He crouched by the hearth, poking the embers back to life. "How long since you ate?" he asked, his voice like gravel and ash. The boy shrugged. "Day, maybe 2. We had some cornmeal, dried beans." She didn't eat much. "She speak at all?" "No, sir. Not since we ran." The rancher nodded slowly, got up, set beans to boil, sliced cornbread from the tin, and left a tin cup of milk beside the girl without asking if she wanted it. She didn't look up, just reached with one small hand and held it to her chest like a secret. He didn't ask any more questions. Didn't need to. The silence in that room was loud enough to tell the story. Later that night, after the children were tucked into the spare bed with the door left open, the rancher sat alone by the window, one hand resting on his old hound's back. Outside, the sky split with lightning, but no rain came, just heat and tension and the promise of something worse behind it. He watched the road, the same road they'd run down. He'd seen men like their father before, men twisted by hate so deep they wore it like skin, men who thought their sons were soldiers and their daughters were curses. He'd buried men like that too, and he knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, Eli was already dressed and sitting on the porch steps when the rancher stepped out with his coffee. "Sir?" the boy said, not turning. "Yeah. If he comes, you got a gun?" The rancher didn't answer at first. He just sipped his coffee and stared into the trees. "I got 2, he said finally. "But I don't plan to need 'em." Eli didn't ask why, but he looked down at his sister, who was still sleeping with one fist curled under her cheek, and nodded like he understood something more than most boys should. By noon, the girl still hadn't spoken. She helped gather eggs, quiet and precise, and fed the chickens by sprinkling seed one kernel at a time like each one was a prayer. The rancher watched her from a distance, the way her shoulders hunched, how her eyes darted toward the treeline every time a bird took flight. She was waiting for something, or someone, and not in a good way. That evening, after the sun slipped behind the hills and the first stars came out, she finally broke. It was over a doll. An old raggedy thing the rancher had found boxed in the attic, stitched years ago by hands long buried. He offered it without a word. Just set it down beside her plate at supper. She didn't touch it, but her lips trembled. And then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Mama had one like that." Eli dropped his spoon. The rancher didn't move. He let the silence wrap around her again. "She named it Clara," the girl whispered, voice breaking. "But Papa burned it in the stove. Said dolls make girls soft." Her hands were shaking. And then she said it, that terrible truth children shouldn't have to know. Mama screamed louder than the fire. That night, the rancher sat up by the window again, lantern low, rifle across his lap. He wasn't waiting in fear. He was waiting in promise. Somewhere out there, a man was coming. But this time, the story wasn't going to end with a door kicked in or a scream swallowed by night. This time, someone was going to stand between those children and the dark. And his boots were already on. The third morning came with a wind that felt different, heavier somehow, like it had carried something in from far off. Not a sound in the trees. No birdsong. Even the cattle stood still in the pasture, heads low, tails swishing slow like they sensed it too. Eli came to the kitchen door before the coffee finished perking. "He's close," he said. The rancher didn't ask how he knew. Sometimes children just feel it, like animals do before a storm. The girl, still wrapped in that quilt, didn't lift her eyes. She sat at the table with her hands flat against the wood like she was holding herself in place. She hadn't spoken again since the word Clara passed her lips. The rancher stood, poured 3 cups. One for himself, one for Eli, and one he left untouched beside the girl's small hands. Then he went out to the barn. He saddled the mule, not the horse. The mule moved quieter, and that's what he needed. He loaded the shotgun behind the feed sacks, checked the revolver in his coat. He wasn't a man who liked to shoot, but he didn't mind it if the reasons were right. And right now, the reasons were standing in his kitchen, still too scared to eat. The stranger came at noon, not up the road like most would. No, this one came through the field, through the creek, like a man who'd once hidden in forests and learned to move with shadows. He stepped out from behind the north fence post just as the rancher came back from the barn. Tall, raw-boned, sunburned face, shirt stained and one boot missing a heel. The kind of man whose soul had leaked out slow over years, until nothing good remained. He didn't smile when he saw the rancher, didn't even blink, just said, "They're mine." The rancher stopped 2 paces from the porch, set his shoulders slow, calm. "They're not yours anymore," he said. The man's jaw clenched. "Law says they are." The rancher nodded. "Maybe." Then he stepped closer. "But the land says different. And so do I." Behind him, Eli stood in the window, hands shaking, watching. The girl still hadn't moved. She just stared into her lap. The rancher never took his eyes off the man. "Go back," he said. The man smirked. "You don't scare me, old man." "I'm not here to scare you," the rancher said. "I'm here to bury you if you step another foot forward." The man's face twisted. "You don't know what that girl is," he spat. "She's cursed. Mama bled for her, screamed for days, said she saw the devil in her eyes. That girl ain't right." The rancher's voice was low now. "She's a child." The man's hand went for something at his side. He never got it halfway. The crack of the rancher's rifle echoed like thunder off the hills. The man dropped, didn't move, didn't groan, just folded into the grass like a tent cut from its ropes. Eli burst out the front door, but the rancher raised a hand. "Stay back." He walked to the body, knelt beside it. The man's chest still rose and fell just barely. "Shot clean through the shoulder," the rancher muttered. "You'll live, but you won't lift that arm again." The man coughed blood. "Devil child," he whispered. "You'll see." The rancher stood. "I've seen enough," he said and turned his back. They loaded him in the wagon and took him into town. The sheriff, a man with too much belly and not enough spine, asked questions with his eyes more than his mouth. The rancher spoke quiet and clear. "Trespasser. Tried to take the girl. The sheriff looked at the children huddled near the post, then at the man bleeding in the back of the wagon. Finally, he said, "You want me to jail him?" "No," the rancher said. "You keep him in the clinic. Next train out, he goes west. Far. You understand me?" The sheriff nodded. And that was that. The ride home was silent. Dust rose behind the wagon like the road was trying to forget what just passed. That night, after the rancher lit the last lamp and the children were bathed and fed, the girl walked to the porch. She stood beside him, small fingers wrapped around the banister. "He's not coming back," she said. It wasn't a question. He looked down at her. "No, darlin', he's not." She nodded once, then said, quiet as a prayer, "Can I keep Clara now?" He blinked. Took him a moment to remember the doll. He'd placed it on the shelf after she walked away from it the first night. "You can keep her," he said. The girl stepped back into the house. And when she returned, she held the rag doll close to her chest, not like a toy, but like a piece of her mother she was finally allowed to carry again. She climbed into his lap without asking. He didn't stop her, just wrapped his arms around her small frame and rocked, slow and steady, like the wind outside was finally done roaring. The days that followed felt strange. Not quiet, because the ranch had always been quiet, but calm, like the storm that had lived in the corners of the house had finally wandered off. The girl, whose name was Ruth, as Eli had finally said, started to speak more. Not much, just little things here and there. "Thank you. I like apples. Clara wants to sleep by the fire." But her voice was steady, and each word felt like a nail driven into the floor beneath her, anchoring her to the world again. Eli was different too. His shoulders weren't so tight. He let the rancher teach him how to mend a fence, shoe a horse, even gather eggs without crushing them. He never smiled, not really, but there was a softness in him now, a permission to exist instead of just survive. The rancher didn't push, didn't pry. He knew that wounds didn't heal with questions. They healed with time and trust. It was Ruth who asked first. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun fall slow behind the cottonwoods, painting the grass gold. She tugged at his sleeve. "Mister." He looked down. She pointed at the corner of the yard, where the big tree stood, the one with the low limbs and the swing hanging from an old rope. "Can you build us a little house? Just for me and Eli? A real one, not made of running." The rancher didn't speak right away, but his throat tightened. He reached out, tucked a bit of hair behind her ear. "Not made of running, huh?" She nodded. He looked to the tree, then back at her. "Well, I think we can do better than that." The next day, he and Eli cleared the ground near the tree, laid out planks, dug holes, set the posts. It wasn't big, not yet, but it was real. One wall, then another. A roofline started to form. Ruth brought little treasures to hide under the floorboards. A button from her mama's dress. A smooth stone, she said, had kept them safe one night under a bridge. A drawing she made of Clara and herself and a tall man with a hat, holding hands. The rancher didn't ask who that was supposed to be. He knew. At the general store in town, the whispers had started. "You hear about old Grady? Took in 2 wild kids. Y'all sure that girl ain't hexed or something? Whole family of hers was cursed, far as I recall. Didn't that boy's pa come looking? He left, didn't he?" Grady ignored it. He'd learned long ago that small minds talked loudest. But when the storekeeper's wife leaned in and said, "You know that girl's trouble, right?" He turned slow, fixed her with a look like thunder before a storm, and said, "She's more decent than most folks I've met in this town." Then he tipped his hat and walked out, Ruth's ribbon in his hand, and didn't look back. That night, Ruth came to the porch again, bare feet soft on the wood. She stood beside him, looking up at the stars. "Mr. Grady? You gonna keep us forever?" He turned, blinked once, then nodded. "Already am." She smiled then, a real smile, the first he'd ever seen on her. And just before she went inside, she looked up again and said, "I think Mama sent you. That week." Eli found a photograph under the floorboards of the bunkhouse. It was old, edges curled, face sun-faded. But it showed Grady long ago, standing beside a young woman with eyes like Ruth's. He brought it to him. Grady held it a long time. Her name was Anna, he said. She wanted kids. But it never happened. Eli didn't ask what became of her. He already knew. Some loss just sits in a man's bones. The house under the tree took shape fast. Ruth painted the door blue. Eli built a shelf for Clara. They moved in with just a pillow and 2 quilts, but it felt more like home than anywhere they'd ever known. On the first night inside, Ruth whispered, "This place ain't scared." Eli nodded. And outside, the wind moved through the leaves, not howling now, but humming. One evening, a horse came up the road slow. Grady watched it from the barn. Rider slouched, hat low, shoulders narrow. Not a threat, just a visitor. It was the sheriff. He dismounted with effort, like every bone in him hated the ride. "Thought I'd check in. They ever say anything more? 'Bout their pa?" Grady shook his head. "They said enough." The sheriff kicked at a rock with his boot. "Town's been talking. They always do. You worried they'll try to take the kids?" Grady met his eyes. "They'll have to climb through me." The sheriff looked past him, toward the little house under the tree. He nodded. "Well, I reckon you're doing more for 'em than most men would." "I'm doing what's right." "Same thing," the sheriff muttered, then climbed back on his horse and rode off. That night, Ruth fell asleep on the porch swing. Grady carried her inside, laid her in the small bed under the window in the new house. Eli watched from the doorway. "She's not scared no more," he said. "No," Grady agreed. "She ain't." Then Eli looked up. "You miss her? The woman in the picture?" Grady nodded once. "Every day." "You think she'd like us?" Grady swallowed. "She'd have loved you." Eli's eyes misted then, but he didn't cry. He just looked out the window and whispered, "Maybe she sent you too." Grady didn't answer, but he sat by their doorway until dawn, and didn't leave once. The snow came early that year. One morning, the grass just disappeared, gone under a thick white hush that blanketed the ranch in stillness. Even the cattle moved slower. The fences creaked with frost, and the creek near the far oak stood stiff and silent. Eli rose before the sun now, not because he was afraid, but because there was work to do, real work. He fed the horses before the rancher asked, stacked wood without complaint. He'd grown taller, too. His eyes no longer darted at shadows. And Ruth was no longer the girl who flinched when a door creaked. She was barefoot on the porch again, but this time because she liked the way snow felt between her toes. She laughed when she slipped, and when she talked, it was a song. The rancher never said it out loud, but in his chest, he carried a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire inside. It was something else, something like family. The house under the tree had curtains now. Ruth made them from scraps she found in the attic. The colors didn't match. The stitches weren't straight, but they waved in the wind like flags on a new nation. Eli carved their initials into the doorframe, E+R. Underneath that, Grady added G. She saw it first, pointed at it with wide eyes. "Yours too." Grady nodded. She smiled like it was the answer to a question she'd been too scared to ask. One night, just before the deepest cold hit, Ruth woke up screaming. Grady heard it from the main house and came running through the snow, boots unlaced. She was sitting up, eyes wide, clutching Clara so tight the stuffing pushed through the seams. "She was in the well," she gasped. "Mama," she was calling me, "said it's cold." Grady sat beside her, took her tiny hand. "It was just a dream, sweetheart. But what if she's still cold?" He looked down. The snow tapped gentle against the window like it was listening. Then he stood. "Come on." They wrapped in quilts and walked to the well, the same one where he'd found her months before, curled up like something left behind. He lifted her up, let her peer down. "Nothing there but memory," he said softly. "But if it helps you sleep, we'll bring her something warm." He placed one of the porch lanterns near the stone base. Ruth set Clara beside it for a moment, kissed the doll's head, and whispered, "Tell her we're safe now." Then she hugged Grady's leg and didn't let go for a long time. Christmas came, though none of them called it that. There wasn't a tree. No gifts wrapped in paper. But Ruth baked something sweet with Miss Ada from the next ranch over, and Eli made Grady a lopsided wooden spoon. Grady gave them each a single item. Ruth a small locket with nothing inside, yet, and Eli a wool vest that used to belong to him long ago. Ruth opened hers slowly. "Can I put a picture in it?" Grady nodded. "If you find one that fits." Later that night, he found her tucking in a drawing, her, Eli, Clara, and Grady, all holding hands. That was good enough. The new year came with a letter. Not from town. From the east. An aunt, it said. A name Grady didn't recognize. She claimed kin. Claimed she wanted the children. "I can give them a real home," she wrote. "With structure. Schooling. Future." Grady sat by the fire a long time, letter in one hand, glass in the other. He didn't wake them. Didn't tell them that night. Just stared into the flames until the bottle ran dry. Next morning, he told them. Ruth froze. Eli stood in front of her. "Do we have to go?" Ruth asked. Grady didn't answer right away. "I won't make you," he finally said. "But if she's your kin." Eli shook his head. "She's not our family." "You sure?" Eli nodded. "We already found ours." The letter went unanswered. 2 weeks later, another came. More stern this time. Legal. Grady took it to town. Sat in the sheriff's office. Read it in silence. "She's pushing hard," the sheriff muttered. "Says if you don't comply, she'll bring the judge." Grady stood. "If she shows up here, I'll let the children decide in front of her face." The sheriff grunted. "I hope she does." She came in spring, wearing silk and gloves. Stepping down from a train like the platform wasn't good enough for her boots. She had a lawyer, a hat too wide, a nose that wrinkled when she looked at the dirt road leading to the ranch. Grady met them halfway down the drive. Ruth and Eli stood behind him. The woman glanced at them barely. "These are the children?" "They are. I have papers. Authority. They're mine by law." Grady said nothing, just stepped aside. "Then ask them." She turned, looked them over like they were laundry she didn't order. "Well?" she asked. "You want a better life? Education? Clean clothes? I have servants. Tutors. You won't have to shovel dung ever again." Eli said nothing. Ruth stepped forward, lifted her chin. "Do you have Clara's shelf?" The woman blinked. "Excuse me, do you have the swing under the tree? The creek? Do you have a mule named Jesse that sleeps by the barn when he's scared of thunder?" The woman's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I have a governess." Ruth turned to Grady. "We're staying." They never heard from her again. Years passed. The treehouse became a real house. 2 bedrooms. Porch. Smoke from the chimney year-round. Eli grew tall. Joined the ranch work for good. Ruth raised chickens. Kept books. Taught herself to read. She never gave up Clara. Even when the stitching wore through and the button eye rolled loose, she kept her close. Repaired her with love. On Grady's 72nd birthday, they held a dinner out on the porch. Ruth wore a ribbon in her hair. Eli made stew. They sang. Not well but loud. Grady sat back in his chair, a blanket on his knees, and listened to the 2 voices that had once come into his life like wounded birds. He looked up. Stars above. Porch light swinging gently in the wind. And a home built not with blood but with choice. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Anna. You brought them to me." And for the first time in years, he cried, not from sorrow, but because he had lived long enough to see broken things made whole.